Hi guys, Nomus here. Welcome back to Northam City for episode number 12. This is a pretty big and important build, as today I'll be building the city's central station. You might notice I'm in a completely different part of the city from where I previously built. This borough is called Nomhattan and is the oldest part of the city. Until the late 1800s, this was all of Northam City until it incorporated nearby cities as boroughs, such as Astoria and Oakland and some others. I'll only build a station here for now and build out the area around at a later stage in the series. The area this station sits in would be considered Midtown Nomhattan, one of the two major business districts in the city. The station is called Northam Grand Central Station, and it was built by the Northam Central Railroad, finished in 1907. It was a huge project which transformed the city, giving it a big hub for all rail services going in and out of the city. And the Midtown business district with its skyscrapers would probably not exist without it. But going into the build, I'll talk a little bit about how I go about doing this in the game. It's going to be a fully underground 24-track station. And to do this, I build the station tracks and platforms sunken down and then go into tunnels at both ends. To make it visually underground, I need to afterwards cover up the top and build on top of it. For the station tracks, I use a blank station from the workshop and change the tracks to American tracks from Railway 2, and then adjust the length to fit the longest passenger trains I got running in the city. I wanted to be very precise, so I used this ruler prop to measure the distance between the tracks for the platforms to have the space they need. There will be 4 main lines with tunnels going into the station, and each of the main lines split into 6 station tracks for big capacity and then merge back to double track at the other end when going back into the tunnel. You'll also see I split the platform hall in 2 with a wall in the middle. I do this because I wanted the station to have 2 separate sections. The western section is for trains run by the Transit Agency of Northam State, while the eastern section is for Amtrak trains. The walls I use are a really nice marble tile texture in PO, and it adds to that grandeur I want for the station. For the station building, I'm using an asset modeled after the old New York Penn Station, which sadly got demolished in the 1960s. It's in my opinion the most beautiful train station built, so I really wanted to pay tribute to it in-game. I converted to PO along with the sub-buildings to put it above the station tracks without the foundation sticking down, and then I add them to their own layer in PO so I can hide them while working on the platforms. For the tunnel entrances at the end of the station, I wanted something more classical. I covered them with this red brick tunnel network, and between them I use a retaining wall with a similar texture to make it all come together. The platforms I'm using are some North American platform networks. I need to place these down manually, and to make this easier and more precise, I'm using the parallel tool in Network Multitool and then adjusting them slightly. Later on I'll also extend the platforms a bit and curve them to follow the tracks, and narrow in at the end where it makes sense. To check that the platform is aligned okay, I put in a first line, which goes between here and the station in downtown Astoria. For the roof, I'm using another really nice marble texture with some patterns. While I'm working on the platforms, I put this into its own layer in PO so I can hide it. And later when I add details to the roof, I can unhide it to check the heights and that everything looks alright.
Always had a way to make it work and find another route. Always had a way to make it work and find another route. Always had a way to make it work and find another route. Always had a way to make it work and find another route.
To cover up the gap left on the platforms, I use IMT to first place ploppable pavement squares. This is in order for decals to stick to the right height. And after that I use decals that match the surface of the platform networks that I've used. Within IMT I also add some details for the wires and catenaries. Right now the wires is floating in thin air, and to support them I add a truss gantry network connected to the roof, which the wire would be suspended from. I've seen similar designs in underground train stations which run with overhead wires, and I think it adds a lot of realism. Before doing more platform level detailing, I want to build out the railway network more and get some of the tunnels connected. I make sure all the tracks at the station has connections towards the main rail yard of the city, which I built back in episode 7. There's a railway network already on the map connected to an outside connection that I want to take use of. It ends a bit northwest of here, and I slowly slope it down to get into a tunnel. And then I connect it to one of the lines on the Amtrak section of the station. For now it will serve Northeast regional Amtrak trains, and I just put in one line for now so that citizens and tourists can start getting to the city by train instead of driving. I've had some issues with traffic every time I add more population, but this will definitely help with it, especially later on when I have the metro network connected around the area. Actually I see some good use already. There was an issue I had with the blank stations, but it turns out for outside connections to use it, I needed to have stops in both directions. I fixed this by extending a tunnel across the bay, and then slowly merged to ground level and set up another outside connection on the land directly south of Nomhattan. While looking at inspiration pictures, I noticed many stations had some metal supports between the middle of double-tracked sections, probably to support the roof and supplement the pillars found on platforms. I tried a few different props but ended up using the pillars for elevated NYC stations, pieced together and darkened a bit to have a slightly different look than other places I've used the prop. As this is an underground station, it needs some lights. I just use some simple station roof lights and place them on the roof above the platforms using IMT. Getting the truss gantry networks to merge smoothly together and make sense was a bit of a mess, where the 6 station tracks merge into the double-tracked main line, but with a bit of trial and error, I managed to figure it out. Now it's time to start making the station functional, and that means paths, lots of paths. As always, I start at the platform. Align them all with a 2 meter wide elevated path and make sure the height is exactly right, and connect them to the tracks around the middle. The paths on both sides of the platform I connect together around the middle as well as on the ends, making it easy for people to move around the station when they are making connections to other lines. After I copied this design a ton of times to all the platforms, I had outside the station to have a blank space for creating a stair design. First I put together a path design with a landing in the middle of what will be the stairs. To design the stairs I used PO cubes and PO stairs, adding some nice textures to them. Marble is a big element in the station, and I use a few different marble textures here in the stairs as well. Above the entrance to the stairs, I make a sign which tells you which end of the station you're exiting to. There's going to be a north and south concourse, which connects all the different platforms. I also note which streets you will exit to. At the north end and main entrance we got Wayne Avenue, and on the south end we got Arkham Avenue. As you can probably hear, these streets are named from the Batman universe. Once I got all the paths in, I started to gradually upgrade them to elevated invisible pedestrian paths. Now that the stairs and platform parts are in, I start getting them connected to the different entrances of the station building. I want to have all the visible entrances connected with parts, So the station will actually be very functional, serving entrances and exits on all 4 sides. You'll see I have 2 long stretches of paths which connects to all the different stairs. And this will mean functionally there will actually be a north and south concourse. All of these paths will be interconnected out of sight, so that the Sims are able to walk in all different directions inside the station. I won't fully build out around the station, but for now I just wanted to put a hotel and an office building to get some activity for the station. Once I've got all the paths set up, I hide the station building again and cover up all the gaps with flappable surfaces. It will just be a plain pavement for now, but it's nice to see it all covered up, so that it's ready for building out later on. These pillars are actually from a huge mansion asset I have, and I think they just fit perfectly within the station. I'm placing them with IMT and adjusting here and there so they don't collide with the stairs at the end of platforms.
Like this.
For the platform displays, I decided to use these blank displays to make them fully custom. I convert them to PO. This means I can use the text tool to write on them with the name of the line and the service, and the time until it arrives. To organize my thoughts, I made some lore for the railway networks in Northam City, which all converge in this station. This is a document I made for the different services and lines. For the western sections, you got the lines run by the Northam States Transit Agency, shortened to NMTA. They are split into 2, named after the private railway companies which started these lines back in the day. West Island Railroad, shortened to WIRR, is a railroad company operating through West Island into the towns and suburbs beyond it. West Island is the name for the island where both Astoria and Oakland is. Northam Central Railroad is a railway company which primarily served towns and suburbs north of Nomhattan. And they are the company which built this station. And then on the eastern section you got different Amtrak services. Acela for high-speed travel along the Northeast Corridor, as well as different regional Northeast lines. The last one is Northam State Express, which are different lines run by Amtrak that primarily runs from Northam City to the other significant cities and towns within Northam State. As I went along, I crossed off all these lines after I had put them on a station display, and they will serve as a guide when I make lines into the station. Some other details added to the platforms are some old signs with the name of the station, and some signs which tells you the track number placed on the pillars. I'm also adding in elevators around the middle of the platform. All these details I copy and paste over to the other platforms, and then adjust them and change the text of the display boards and track number signs as I go along. there was a need for some ticking machines on the platforms. Here I just had 3 of them together to then copy and paste them in different spots, mostly around stairs, as that's where most people will enter. Further I put together a group of benches which have a railway map above them for some navigation, which I think is a nice little detail. And I also added some trash bin props by the bench groups. Now I'm adding some final touches to the station at platform level with a few details. First I want to get a lot of signal props around the junctions. I mentioned this warning sign in the last episode that I made myself. I'll be placing these on the edge of all the platforms, along with some fences and stairs to have access for railway workers. I'm also adding in some more clutter like random electric boxes and some cables that just lie around outside the tunnels. What I'm starting to build here is a main line, which is used by the Acela trains, forming a high-speed railway along the northeast corridor. This will be like an alternate reality, where most of the northeast corridor actually has been rebuilt to support the high speed the Acela trains are capable of. It's not perfect, but I try my best to have gentle slopes and big sweeping curves in the tracks, in order not to have too sharp turns. It will at some point start rising up to an elevated section to become fully grade separated, and also to be able to pass over the highway further up north. It will then rise down to ground level again through a valley, which I will create with some terraforming tools. The junction here I imagine was created when the northeast corridor was rebuilt for high-speed rail operation. I wanted to make a junction where trains don't cross over, but instead merge into a line, free of conflicts with the opposite directions. The tracks that merges into a junction here would be the old main line, which still serves many other Amtrak services, mostly to different suburbs where people commute into Northam City for work. All the main lines will branch off like this to serve all the different lines I spoke about earlier. This will be like an ongoing process throughout the series. thought a lot about which elevator network to use for this section, but I finally landed on something I felt made sense. It needed to look somewhat modern, as it would have been rebuilt in a large upgrade of the main line. The distance between pillars felt far too big, so I pieced together my own pillars with some expressway pillar props in IMT and chose a distance between them which seemed more realistic. Where the main line goes from a tunnel up to ground level, I wanted to just detail up with some retaining walls and grass networks. Even though I won't build here just yet, I'll come back here in the future, and it's nice to add some details so it doesn't look so bad with the abrupt terrain and cliff textures. I'm just starting to get in some of the street grids, which will make up Midtown and the rest of Nomhattan, going northwards. This is very inspired, of course, by the street grids in Manhattan in New York, where you have wide avenues going north-south, while there are alternating one-way streets crossing them in an east-west direction. The pattern does get broken up by the occasional smaller avenues crossing east-west direction. I'll also take some inspiration from street names with the numbered avenues and the cross-town streets. You can also see me changing the look of the junctions slightly in IMT to get the right look for the crosswalks that I want. Directly outside the station, I wanted to get some detailing in to give it that important look. I sorted through a lot of decals and ended up on these white marble tiles, which were just perfect. I'm also adding a few other details along the sidewalk, which I will get back to. I'll be having a few elevated metro lines within this part of the city as well, and just wanted to get some of the networks in so I can see where it will sit. While I know this might block the view of the station entrance, it is more of a secondary entrance and not the main one. So I think it's realistic that it could be built like this. I'm using the pillars that comes with this network, but I turn them into PO so I can adjust them or else they'll stick down into the station below. I also think it gives some nice variation to use these pillars within Nomhattan for the elevated parts. I'll have a mix of elevated and underground metro lines here at a later date. Outside the station I want to add some details which makes it really pop. So I took some inspiration from things you can see around Manhattan, especially around the stations. Lots of planters, benches, postal boxes, bike stands and newspaper stands. For the main entrance I wanted a big and old important looking sign with the station name. I used this asset called Philadelphia Historical Marker and adjusted and scale up quite a bit using PO. Then I add the station name with the text tool and I use this very old looking font. It's a bit hard to read perhaps, but I really love the look it gives. It's mostly cosmetic anyways. I didn't just want plain pavement here, so on the other sidewalks I try a few different concrete tile and slab decals until I land on something that I like. I'm also adding in more details around the buildings. Plenty of ground floor shops and of course the very familiar temporary scaffolding that's been there for years that you see all over New York, especially on older buildings like these ones. Something I don't think I mentioned is that I made another prop and put it up on the workshop. These are subway ventilation grates and I'll be putting them along sidewalks where I got the subway lines running below. Anyways, that is it for this episode. Quite a big building this, I think it in total took over 20 hours or something like that. But I am really happy with the result and I hope you enjoyed watching it if you made it here to the end. A like, comment and subscribe would be greatly appreciated and help me to grow the channel. I also do have a Patreon in case you would wish to support me further. Have a great rest of your day and hope to see you next time.
Pedestrian.